Hi guys, in this video I want to talk about how to do the best storyboards you can. Now I want to start off by dispelling two myths. One, you need to be a great artist to be a great storyboarder. I don't believe this at all. And two, there's a right and a wrong way to storyboard. You storyboard however you need to. In this video I'm going to show you two different ways of storyboarding, but in both examples they would absolutely get an A grade. So for those of you who are here for the quick answer and want to know what the golden rule is for a great storyboard, it's simple. A good storyboard is one that you can watch, one that you can absolutely experience, beyond just what the camera angle is and what happens. What can you hear? What's the lighting like? It needs to have all of the details that you would need in a full film. It's like Martin Scorsese said in this quote, "The storyboard for me is the way to visualize the entire movie in advance." Now have a think what he means by that. Before the expense of getting all of your crew and your equipment on set, which can be so expensive, it's a way of seeing every single shot with the music, with the lighting, and seeing what works and what doesn't work. Peter Jackson did this absolutely loads during The Lord of the Rings, and even went to the extent of hiring voice actors so that he could watch the entire film in storyboard before he even pressed the record button.
Across the waters of the Nimrodel, curse their foul feet!
So, bearing in mind, you're all going to have very different levels of artistic ability. What I'm going to do is I'm going to draw this twice. I'm going to draw it once for people who have slightly more of a visual way of working, and for people who genuinely believe they have no artistic ability, I'm going to do another version where we're going to be relying more on text. Now these are two storyboards that I've made. There are tons of templates online, but I like these ones because it allows you to adapt it most of all to your style. So here we're going to be putting most of the information in the frame. Here we're going to be making loads and loads of notes down the side. Now we need to have something to storyboard, so what I want to do is do this back to front. Let's watch this clip from Jurassic Park and just have a think beyond just the camera and what happens. What are the different elements that we're going to have to translate from moving image into a two-dimensional print format?
Timmy, what is it? It's a velociraptor. It's inside.
So let's take a look at how we would do this visually. So in this one, I'm going to try and draw with as much artistic ability as I can, which isn't actually that much. I'm going to draw the whole scene, including the movement of the camera. Okay, so everything that we see when the frame starts and everything that we see when it finishes. So down here, there was the little girl, there was the little boy. We've got a couple of raptors here. Okay, so here I've tried to draw the entire scene. We need to include things like lighting in this. So when you consider how are we going to show the fact that there's like an awful lot of shadows on the wall and very, very low-key lighting, if you've got the artistic confidence, you can kind of literally just show where shadows will be. So they're casting quite heavy shadows themselves. The background is very, very shadowy. We almost got irising kind of going around. I'm not even worrying too much about where the frames are, but I'm showing that. Again, I want to make sure that's absolutely clear as to what the lighting's like, so don't be afraid to write on the frame itself. So we've got low-key lighting that focuses on the characters. If there's anything on here that it's not entirely sure what it is, like this kind of counter, it's not entirely obvious. I've done it very, very sketchy just to show that you really don't need that artistic ability. Don't be afraid to label things. We've got girl, boy, raptors, counter. In other words, make it absolutely clear to the person looking at your storyboard, assuming it's not you, what it is they're looking at. It might make perfect sense to you, but it's got to make sense in the context of this video to the person marking your work. Okay, so the next thing that we said we were going to talk about was the way that the camera works. Now, I've drawn this from the perspective that I want the camera to be in, but don't forget there was that camera movement. It did that kind of dolly type crane thing that moved down as well. So what you can also do is literally draw on the frame, in this case, how the camera moves. So here, the first frame started around about here, and it ended with that kind of mid-close-up of the boy and the girl. And what I'm going to do now is just show how that movement goes. So you can see, this one is all about the visuals. We've now got our starting frame and how it actually pans down to our finishing frame. Obviously, I've done this very sketchy, I've done it very scribbly. I'm not trying to be at all impressive, I don't think it is. But it shows you one way that you can do things visually, if you prefer to really picture things. So let's stop where we are now and start thinking about how we would do this even more simply if you do not enjoy drawing, or if you want to just stick to stickmen, because I insist that you can do this. Let's do these exact same camera movement now over here. So I'm going to start off with the first shot, but this time I'm going to have it separate. So we've got something that resembles a raptor. Honestly, I don't think anyone would call that a good drawing. It's not entirely clear as to what it is, so we should write down exactly what that means. We can say here, raptors appear at the kitchen door. I think in this case it's fairly obvious as to what we're looking at. We could clarify that underneath if we wanted, but here we're actually making things far more descriptive. Kitchen is very low-key lighting. Raptors scream as they enter. So much of what the pictures are doing for us here, if you can't draw any dinosaurs any better than this, then you've got to rely more on this actual text work. Now what I've done with this one is actually include the action, because again, you might have an idea for your storyboard as to what's happening, but it might not be entirely obvious to the person viewing it. So again, in both of them, I would actually say, give a very, very brief description as to what happens in this scene. So here, I'm also going to put down raptors enter. Boy and girl look scared. Okay, now going back to this shot, we have a continuation where it actually ends up on the second frame. Again, I just want to prove that you do not need to be the artist. We've got the girl and the boy looking scared. I'm going to label them. In fact, if you've got color, you could use these to make associations as well. So this character is always going to have an orange top or a yellow top, and this character is always going to have an orange top. And so that's a way of distinguishing between shots. Now here I still need to show the camera movement, where I've shown it in one frame on this version. Here, these actually belong to the same shot, but they could very easily look like a separate edit. So here I can put down shot 1A, and here is shot 1B, showing it's a continuation of this. Presuming I go to a different shot here, this would then become shot 2. So how do we tell the viewer how the camera moves from shot 1A to shot 1B? We can just write it down again. So we can say camera pans across to shot 1B. So what I've done here is the exact same thing, but again, I think where this is more visual, it involves perhaps slightly more artistic ability. I insist, you can just draw something that resembles what you want, but as long as it has the correct composition, as long as it shows how the camera moves, you're still achieving the same effect. Okay, so what other information are we going to need to include to ensure that we can absolutely see this just as clearly as if we were watching the clip? Sound is a big factor. Now again, by the time you're storyboarding, you might have no idea what your finished soundtrack or sound effects are going to sound like, but you need to give the person an impression of what they can hear. So I'm just going to put in the background a little musical note to show that it's music, and I'm going to describe it the best I can. Very low, chilling cello music. You could also include sound effects in this. So I want to have the sound effect of the boy and the girl panting, breathing, and then of course we've got the sound effect of the raptors in the background. Here, where I'm not actually like showing an awful lot visually, I need to be even more descriptive. So I'm going to write down what happens in this shot. Boy and girl look panicked. Camera finishes on mid-shot. Now that's the important point. You've seen me do it now with low-key lighting and with mid-shot. From the perspective of trying to get the best grade, use that key terminology: mid-shot, long-shot, close-up, high-key lighting, low-key lighting, diegetic sound, voiceover. The more of this kind of terminology you can show in your work, the higher your chances are of nailing a storyboard. So we've covered the fact that you need to include mise-en-scene, whether it's drawn or described. We've looked at how you need to show what the camera does in terms of its composition and its movement, be it in one frame or two separate frames. We also need to show how you would deal with editing, whether one clip does a straight cut like it does in 99% of cases, or whether you want to have a dip to white or a dip to black or a crossfade. How do you do this? Again, it's up to you, but the way I've always done it traditionally is to use the symbols that you get in old school Final Cut Pro. So for a straight cut, I'll always put this at the side, almost showing a clip ending and a clip starting. If I was to show a crossfade between two clips, I'd be tempted to draw a cross showing the transition between the two. So I know between shot 1B and shot 2, we have a crossfade. Or of course there's the other option. You can just, again, you can just write it. So on the side of shot 2, we can just write crossfade to shot 2. Just like I said at the start of this video, the important thing is that you show the information. It doesn't really matter how you do it as long as it's clear to you and the person who's marking your work. So what about other specific things that you might need to include, such as depth of field, focus? Well, let's just have a think about how we could show that. Let's look at this shot. Let's assume that we wanted to have a focus pull from the background to the foreground. How could we show that? Well, first off, we could describe it. So we could actually say focus pull from background to foreground. That would work absolutely fine. If you wanted to, you could show them as two separate shots. So in the first one, you could just draw a grey crosshatch over these guys. And in the second shot, change it so that the crosshatch was in the background and actually label that with where the focus is. Focus in the background or focus in the foreground. Either way, you're making that absolutely clear. I've shown with shadows how we could show an absence of light, but what if you had specific lighting from a natural source or something like this? Well, you might want to show that actually on the frame. So here I'd want the guys to be lit from above. I can just draw what looks something like a lamp and show where the lighting's coming from. I could then write next to it spotlight from above. You could describe it. Or like I did in one before, just show light with shade. Now I'm hoping you're looking at these two examples and not thinking they are anything impressive. I've tried my hardest to show a lack of artistic ability. But the one thing that I would say that we have in each of these examples is a very, very clear picture of your intentions as a director. The whole point of the storyboard is to consider what you will or won't need on the actual day of shooting before you start spending money. So let's just have a quick recap of what you need for an awesome storyboard. 1, show what you can in terms of the mise-en-scene. If you're able to draw it, then do. That's fantastic. If you can't, just draw the most essential placement of things with a description on the side. The camera work, so this includes special instructions such as the focus, the composition, the way the camera moves. Show that however you need to, whether it's literally drawing the starting and finishing point of the frame. You could do the same thing for a zoom in, so you could show it as zoomed out and then zoomed in. Or again, just describe what the camera does and have it split over several different frames. Editing, make it absolutely clear how you get from shot 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5. And even though you're probably going to get sick of writing cut 2, cut 2, cut 2, which it is in most cases, you need to make that clear to the audience. The other thing I didn't mention in terms of editing is shot duration. How long does it take to get from here to here? 5 seconds, 6 seconds, and so on. And finally, sound. Make sure that as we're watching it, we know that there's a certain sound effect or a piece of music that happens as the character turns around. That makes everything feel so much more watchable, for want of a better word. But what I've done with both of these videos, guys, is I've tried to show you don't need to be an artist. And there isn't a single way of doing things. Do what makes sense to you. Do what communicates your ideas the best. As always, thank you very much for watching. If you're looking for something else to watch, I'd highly recommend moving on to my tips for making a music video, if that's what you're storyboarding. Or if you're just getting into media studies, you can watch my A to Z guide right here.